So I saw this post this morning from Robert Sterling. He's a conservative investment guy on Twitter. And I want to read to you what he wrote. In fact, Aaron's showing it to you right now if you're watching on BlazeTV. He says, this is the scariest chart I've ever made. This is what it looks like when a country is heading towards a financial precipice. Each color shows $1 trillion getting added to the national debt. Not that long ago, he said it took 6 years to add one of those bars, and we were freaking out about that then. He says we're now adding this every few months, every 90 to 100 days, or 120 days, we're adding that level of debt, $1 trillion. He said the explosion of debt has been the only truly bipartisan phenomenon of my lifetime. Put a pin in that statement there. We're going to come back to it. The only truly bipartisan phenomenon of my lifetime. For us conservatives, we can't just blame it all on Biden and Obama. For you Democrats, you can't just put this on Trump. It's both parties, all presidents, every Congress. The acceleration started with George W. Bush in 2002 and the war on terror. Military spending, those tax cuts at the same time. $6 trillion in debt grew to $7 trillion in 23 months. $8 trillion in another 21 months. $9 trillion in another 23 months. And then the Great Recession hit. We added that next trillion in just 13 months, crossing the $10 trillion in debt for the first time in American history, and we haven't looked back. During the second Obama term, with spending reined in by the Tea Party movement, annual deficits reduced to less than $1 trillion and growth in the debt slowed down. At the end of Obama's tenure, it took nearly 20 months to go from $19 trillion to $20 trillion, and that would be the last time it took a full year to add $1 trillion to the debt. Total Republican control in 2017. A real estate developer got inaugurated as president. If there's one thing we all know and love about real estate investors, they understand the value of leverage. Under Trump, even as the economy surged, deficits grew. And national debt once again spiraled. We ended 2019, so pre-COVID, with a little over $24 trillion in debt. That's $1 trillion a year. And then COVID hit. Along with the stimuluses, the PPP loans, massive government spending, and reduced tax receipts. Over just 2 months in 2020, April and May, we added $2 trillion to the national debt. Ever since, we've been adding $1 trillion every 160 days or so. With Biden in the White House and a narrowly divided Congress, we're now adding $1 trillion to the debt every 3 to 4 months. It took just 91 days to go from 32 to 33 trillion in debt, 104 days to go to 34 trillion, and it's not slowing down. Biden has another 300 plus days in office at least. Whether it's he or Trump entering their second respective terms in 2025, the debt will likely be above $37 trillion. Where does it end? I want to end this right there. Where does it end? So I said to put a pin in what he said, that the explosion of debt has been the only bipartisan phenomenon of his lifetime. The explosion of debt has been the only bipartisan phenomenon of his lifetime, he says. And then he asks at the end, where does it end? It ends with exactly where it began. Here's the latest budget numbers through 2022. Entitlements, obviously 2024 is just getting started. The final 2023 numbers aren't in yet. So the last full year of budgets we have and spending numbers we have, courtesy of Heritage Foundation, these numbers, by the way. Biggest federal budget expenditures as of 2022. Entitlements. That's Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare's in there now. And of course, Social Security. They represent 46% of the federal government's expenditures, nearly half. The next biggest expenditure, what's called income security or the welfare state. This would be food stamps, welfare, etc. That's 18%. National defense is just 12%. Just 12%. But it's the third largest expenditure. Fourth, discretionary spending. That's where you'd find things like Ukraine, for example. And then fifth, interest on the debt, 8%, which we have to pay to avoid defaulting. Those 5 items, just those 5, in the monstrosity that is the federal budget, those 5 things account for 94% of every dollar the federal government spent in 2022. We could cut all foreign aid. We could cease all earmarks. We could eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. And those are all popular talking points, and I agree with them. But they would not put a dent in this debt. They would not put a dent in this debt. There are more responsible things we could do to slow the current trajectory. And that's honestly, in this election cycle, one of the biggest things you're voting for. Can we get back to just adding $1 trillion a year instead of every 90 days? But that wouldn't fundamentally change what the problem is here. Do you know why Robert Sterling says this is the only truly fundamentally bipartisan thing he has seen in his lifetime? Because it is the only truly fundamentally bipartisan thing he's seen in his lifetime. And why is this? Because it's who we are. There are core constituencies on both sides that want this. And constituencies aren't elites. They're not special interests. Those things are terrible influences, of course. But they're us. We want these things. Now, some of us want different things. Some core constituencies want different things than the other core constituencies do. But that's the trade-off. Treason never prospers. What's the reason? Because whenever treason prospers, none will dare call it treason. If I permit your suckling spot on the teat, then you'll permit mine, and there's no one to condemn us. We're co-conspirators. The budget is a reflection of us, just like the people we elect are a reflection of us. Now, if you're watching a channel like The Blaze, and especially if you're paying extra out of pocket to do so, if you are in an audience like this, you're going to get a lot of what I just said. And you're going to nod in affirmation and approval. But understand, we're a minority within a minority. Within a minority. There has not been in many years, and on the horizon, I don't see that changing, a successful national campaign mounted on debt relief. Too many people's hands are in the cookie jar now. Who's the guy that came up with the idea of the stages of democracy where you could eventually vote yourself other people's money? We're well past that stage. So we can get into Laffer curves, and those things are important, and economic theories, and debate Austrian economics and Keynesian economics and supply side economics, and we can all grab our Milton Friedman quotes, and I love Milton Friedman too. Read a lot of that stuff when I was growing up. It's part of the Reagan era kid. But ultimately, out of the heart, the mouth speaks. And where we store our treasure is a reflection of what's in our heart. This isn't happening to us because people don't want this, but because people do. In every state in the union, government is the biggest industry in that state. Because the number one expenditure of every state government is education. A largely government regulated monopoly. The second largest, the two largest industries in America are energy and education. Perhaps the two most regulated industries in America. The number 3 industry, healthcare, is coming up down the closing stretch here. So we're not going to waste, fraud, and abuse our way out of this. We're not going to stop sending money to Ukraine. I've been sitting here pounding the table against what's going on, or our involvement in Ukraine from the day that war launched. Have I not?
Right.
Yeah, but that's a moral issue to me. And I don't see any foreign policy gain there for us at all. You have Mitch McConnell out there saying this morning, the world is at war in Ukraine. I mean, maybe you are. I'm not. Aren't you at war? I'm not. But I guess in the end, I'm not of this world. So you guys are welcome to have a world war over Ukraine if you want, but you won't. Nobody with my DNA will be participating in that. Thank you. But we could get rid of all that tomorrow. We could stop issuing every check of foreign aid tomorrow. It wouldn't put a dent in this. We're the problem. And without revival, where people decide that I'd rather have control over my own life than play another generation of class warfare with entitlement spending, and nothing will change. And if that never changes, well, then you're going to see the stuff of history books. But we're not victims. I know in the right-wing podcasting handbook, I'm supposed to come on here and rail against special interests and globalists. We get a lot of support from special interests and globalists on our show, right? We've got all kinds of global corporate backing for this program, do we not?
It's an endless fountain of globalism here.
Yeah, the Bush wing of the party has, throughout the course of my career, been very supportive of our message and invited me to speak quite often at their functions.
CPAC.
Exactly.
Big fans.
Yeah. So, but in the end, we have to look in the mirror. There's no real market for this. So, we're the market. All right? The taxpayers are the market. That's us. And so, until our priorities change, these fundamentals won't. Thoughts?
Yeah, there's when you talk about what swims downstream from what, politics, culture, etc. I think there's some of that here. I mean, what you are calling outside of revival, but we're talking classically, austerity measures, and everybody needs, to grab an oar and be part of that. But what motivates them in the rest of the culture where that's something that is put into practice and worked? What other part of our lives are we austere about? Our social time, the things that we do sexually, in terms of our appetites and the boundaries there. I mean, where? We are the opposite of austere in every part of our culture right now. What you're asking is quite simply impossible.
Yeah, in our current spiritual condition, it's impossible. Yeah.
You've answered the question that I asked yesterday, both on and off the air. Like, if you had the Wonder Woman lasso of truth and you put it around somebody like a Joni Ernst or a John Cornyn or a John Thune or a Chuck Schumer, or pick any swampy D.C. politician, and you ask them, What do you think is going to happen if you keep adding to the national debt, $1 trillion to the national debt?
I'll get reelected.
Every 100 days. If you ask them what it's a non sequitur. They don't even think about that because we don't demand that they think about that. Politicians are not aberrations. They're reflections. Always. Always. For better or worse. It can be better. But most often these days, it's worse. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know that this is not sustainable. As Rob said our colleague at Blaze Media said on the Overtime yesterday, the good news here in all this is that we all will become trillionaires.
Yep.
Just about it. This has vaccination, the jab, too. Look at all the evidence we have. Are we willing to be austere about that? A few have. People in this audience have. Largely, though, give me more. Jab away. Mm-hmm. We just don't have a mindset for austerity on any level. We're utterly gluttonous on every level.
Once you removed your currency from a finite resource and allowed yourself to just print paper by fiat, the only thing that was going to rein you in would be the heart of the people. And the heart of the people is corrupt.